So today I'm going to be talking to you guys about chapter 3 and chapter 4 of The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. Okay, to start off, I want to go through the definition of a startup as a refresher. We reviewed this in the last chapter. Oh wait, skipped ahead. Sorry, guys. Hold on. There we go. Okay. A startup is a human institution designed to create a new product or service under conditions of extreme uncertainty. This is a quote from the book. Just remember that as we kind of go through the rest of this presentation, because I think it's really important to remember that definition. So with that in mind, Eric Ries starts off chapter 3 by stating that learning is the oldest excuse in the book for failure of execution. When startups fail, learning is one of the first excuses that managers and entrepreneurs will fall back on when they fail to achieve the results they promised. This kind of learning, in quotes, is a cold comfort to employees who are following an entrepreneur into the unknown or investors who are pouring time and money into a startup. In the lean startup model, Ries takes a different approach to learning called validated learning. Validated learning is the process of demonstrating empirically that a team has discovered valuable truths about a startup's present and future business prospects. It's not this after the fact realization or something to hide a failure, like the learning he described in the first part of this. Ries shares an example between these two types of learning through his own experience with a startup. Back in 2004, Ries and his team had the idea to connect the two worlds of instant messaging with 3D avatar characters. They spent 6 months working on this product. When they finally launched their product, nothing happened. Nobody even tried their product. Can you imagine this? They spent weeks trying to make the product better. They spent time interviewing teams, tech early adopters, and instant messaging users. And what they found is that their assumption on what customers really wanted was completely wrong. Bit by bit, these early adopters broke apart their initial strategy, which they thought was a brilliant idea when they started this journey. Ries reflected on the time and hours they spent to launch this product only for it to all fail. They learned something about their customers at the end of this, so it wasn't like they didn't learn anything, but they realized that they could have learned this way earlier on with less time, effort, and money spent on the initial product. Ries and his team, they were so fixated on adding these new features and fixing the bugs in the product, but the key here is to understand what the customer really was looking for. A question he asked himself was whether this product was a waste or value creating. Ries spent months working on this product before he launched it, and he goes on to say that most of this was a waste because because if he would have used the one instant messaging platform to realize no one wanted to use it. Of course, he did learn many valuable lessons and insights from the customers he talked to, but the reality is he could have gotten to the same conclusions quicker and with less effort if he had just started the process off by experimenting. There was a quote that I thought was super important to point out, and that is, lean thinking defines value as providing benefit to the customers. Anything else is a waste. Eric Ries and his team thought they knew what their customers wanted, but they were wrong. And most of the time, if you ask your customers what they want, they don't really know what they want. The only way to get this valuable information is through experiments. By performing experiments, you are able to get empirical data with real customers, which is validated learning. So a question for you all, and if a couple of you just want to share, was there anything else after reading through Ries's story that stood out to you as kind of an aha moment? Because he really went into depth through this whole kind of process and journey he was going through and kind of all the failures along the way and what they learned. Would just love to learn or hear from you guys if there was anything that really stood out to you about that story.
Yeah,
Go ahead, dude.
I was just, yeah, go ahead. Sorry. What really stuck out to me was the failure, but then not thinking earlier about what the customer actually wanted. So it's like you go through all this process, you waste all this time and effort, energy, and money, but the answer was like right there. You just didn't think of it. So I thought that stuck out to me actually in a really big way. It's like an aha moment. Like that's why it's important when we're thinking about how we want to improve or innovate. We are doing these surveys for our clients and customers and lenders and just trying to get the right sample before we even go. But yeah, just they kind of started backwards almost.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, it's been interesting. This was the first time that, because I remember just like interviewing and doing focus groups and all these things in the past. And I used to always walk away with like, I don't know, frustration about like why can't I get clearer answers from them just based upon like, what do you think? And it just made me realize like they don't really even know. Like just that reality of like they need to have something tangible to sort of work off of to figure it out. And I think that makes total sense to me. I just had never been able to put it into words, and it just was like, okay. So that was an aha for me.
Yeah, I love that too. I loved because it's like if you were just ask them what do they want, they really don't know what they want, and you have to figure that out through testing and experiments.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Awesome. Okay, so then chapter 4 dives into the importance of performing experiments and how to do so in the lean startup model. So think back to when you were in school and you had to perform an experiment. One of the first few steps in the scientific method, if you can remember this scientific method, is to construct a clear hypothesis that makes a prediction about what is supposed to happen. In a startup, the experiment is guided by the vision. The goal of every startup experiment is to build a sustainable business around the vision, and that was stated in the book. So I'm going to ask you guys again to join with me on the count of 3 because this is kind of centered around the vision. We're going to state our vision again, but as like collectively together on the count of 3. So 1, 2, 3. Delighting
the client with a simple funding experience that produces confidence, resulting in 2 billion of revenue.
You guys sounded great. Okay, so another story they shared in the book is about how Zappos started. Zappos is the world's largest online shoe store with annual gross sales in excess of $1 billion. The founder, Nick Swinmurn, designed an experiment to answer one simple question. That is there already sufficient demand for a superior online shopping experience for shoes? And this was, before online shopping really became like the way people shop. So to test this, he asked local shoe stores if he could take pictures of their shoes and post them online. And in exchange, and for their permission, he would come back to the store and buy them at full price if the customer bought them. This experiment gave him accurate data about his customers. He was able to interact with these real customers, and it allowed him to be surprised by what the customers, how they behaved and what they wanted. Like, for example, I think he mentioned he didn't think about like customers wanting to return the shoes. So then he had to take that into account. So that was something that surprised him in this process. So this experiment, so Zappos started as a simple and small product, and this experiment led to a quantifiable outcome. In 2009, Zappos was acquired by Amazon for $1.2 billion, all thanks to this simple experiment. So just keep that in mind, how like impactful that one simple experiment was to where they are now. So some other key takeaways from this chapter were, in order to break down a grand vision, you have to break apart the value hypothesis and the growth hypothesis. As stated in the book, the value hypothesis is a way to test whether a product or service provides value to customers, and the growth hypothesis helps us test how new customers will discover the product or service. Secondly, the second way to break down this grand vision is you need a concierge MVP, or minimal viable product. I know we're going to dig into this further in like another chapter, so I'm not going to go into this now, but just keep that in mind as we continue to go through this book. In the lean startup model, they describe an experiment to be the first product. It helps you to begin to understand who the early adopters will be, and it will also teach you about what the customers really want. A good question to ask yourself when building a startup is, do consumers recognize that they have the problem you are trying to solve? Far too often we skip past this question and go straight into solving a problem we think others are facing, which I think is like kind of like a no duh, but at the same time you're like, yeah, like you think you have this ultimate solution, but are the consumers even struggling with that same problem that you think you can solve? So to wrap up this presentation, I wanted to touch on one more story in the book because I thought it was a great example of how to run an experiment in a startup. In Dobie, India, less than 7% of the population had washing machines. Akshay, an employee of Procter & Gamble at the time, saw an opportunity to bring a laundry service to the city. He ran a few experiments to see if his assumptions were correct. What he would do is he would go around to different street corners and park a truck with a washing machine in the back of it. And this was more of a marketing tactic, but people would bring up their clothes to get them washed, and then he would return them to them. And then he'd go around to all these different city corners and park the truck. And what he actually found out was interesting, that the people that were bringing their clothes to them, they were actually really suspicious if they were just gonna like drive off with their clothes. So what he did in this situation is he pivoted and he created a kiosk type of stand for these washing machines. And after many experiments and finding ways to pivot, they were able to build this village laundry service with this kind of kiosk type service for these washing machines. And they were able to actually expand to 14 other locations as well. So with all that to say, experiments provide quantitative data to understand what your customers are really looking for in a product and what they are not. This will save you time, money, energy, and ultimately help you to understand what your customers really want. So to end, I just have some questions that we can talk through, and we can kind of do this together, turn on our screens and everything, but thank you for watching this presentation.